Hey Brian, I hope you're doing well. Lots of good things going on in your golf swing since I saw it last. I think you're really close. I noticed in your email you said that with the irons you have a tendency to hit some pulls, and then with the longer stuff you have a tendency to hit some shots that kind of over push cut on you. So I want to shed some light on that. Let's first take a look at this backswing. This move that you're making, this first move off the ball is a little bit unorthodox, having the club this far outside your hands at the first parallel. I typically don't see that from a lot of my players, but what I will say is I don't think it's that big of a deal because you make a nice recovery move after that and you get the club into what I would consider a pretty darn good position at the top of the backswing. So there's a lot of things that I like about where you're at here at the top. You've got the trail arm in a pretty good position. You've got a nice flat lead wrist. The club face is in a solid condition, and you've got a lot of depth to your hand path here. If I draw a straight line down from the butt of the club, I mean you literally got it, outside the heel line. So I would consider that quite deep. Where I see the issue is on the downswing here. When you start down, you make a nice little shallowing move in transition right there with rotating those forearms. But the problem is it doesn't continue to shallow. If you kind of focus in on and key on the center of mass of the club here, just kind of that balance point, it starts out shallowing nicely in transition, and then it kind of starts to stand up in this phase of the swing and kind of move a little bit more vertically. And it comes down and it's a little high and above the hands here. So at this last parallel, we never want to see a shot where the sweet spot of the club is outside your hands and even above your hands. We always want to see the club in a little bit more of a trailing condition, so down here somewhere. No matter if you're hitting a draw or a fade, we want to see that center of mass trailing you because it will allow for a shallower angle of approach. It will allow you to maintain your body's tilts throughout the downstroke, and you can just continue to pour on the kind of the rotational speed in the downswing here. So let's talk a little bit about why that center of mass is riding high. In this phase right here, the trail shoulder is nice and external at the top. The problem is in the downswing, it's moving a little bit internal. Notice how this, the elbows are separating and this forearm bone is getting very kind of horizontal to the ground here. And that's a dead indicator to me. The splitting of these elbows, those elbows separating, getting further apart, is a big indicator that you're starting to, as those elbows start to separate, the force that you start applying on the handle becomes more downward. And what happens is that center of mass is going to try its damnedest to try to align itself with the force that's being applied on that grip. And so it's as these elbows are separating in this phase of the swing that center of mass stays a little bit high. Now, this is the reason why you're hitting pulls with your irons, because that sweet spot's kicking high and out in front of you, and it kicks your swing direction, makes that face point down and to the right, and that's why we're hitting pulls with the irons. Now, the problem is with the driver, that doesn't feel good to be steep like that. So I'm 100% positive once you start to feel that sweet spot high, you probably with the driver start early extending a little bit. What I mean by that is the pelvis starts to move in, the head starts to move back, and that's kind of a late shallowing move which tries to drop that sweet spot back behind you. And the problem is that as that sweet spot's dropping back behind you, the face starts pointing out here, which is why you're probably like push block cutting the long stuff. So let's talk about, or let's look at kind of what we want to feel here. So if we can get to the top of this backswing, and when you transition and put that little shallowing move on there, what I want you to continue to focus on is, I'm going to back up here in the backswing just a little bit. If you look closely, I don't know if this is good enough quality video, but there's a seam on your shirt right here. And I want you to just remember that seam as I come back to it. When you go to the top and you start to transition and you start coming down, I want you to try to get that elbow on the front side of that seam as quickly as you can. So it would be as though the elbows are squeezing together. They're getting closer together, and that left elbow would be moving more down in front of your rib cage at this point. So I want you to try to get that left elbow down in front of that left hip. And what that's going to do is going to push your hand path a little bit further out, but it's going to allow that center of mass to kind of keep dropping just a little bit more, so that when you get down here in this phase, the sweet spot is low and back and trailing you a bit. And what it looks like is over here on the right. So pretty similar to position to where you're at, but watch the trail elbow movement, how it comes down in front of the rib cage, and the club just continues to shallow all the way down into this phase. So you can see that the club head is definitely lower than the hands. That left elbow position is more down in front of the left hip. The hand path is further out, which means the hand path can now turn on a more acute circle, and that's going to give us a lot more control over that club face through the ball. So you'll notice there's not a lot of flipping and rolling going on, and the club face is very, very stable as it moves around the corner there. And in your case, you know, it's riding a little bit high, and it gets a little bit more flipped over here in the follow through. So hope this makes sense to you. You're pretty close. I don't think we need to mess with this first part of the backswing because you're getting it into a pretty solid position here. We just need to try to get that trail elbow down in front of that seam while you feel like that center of mass is continuously lowers down behind you.